Hi everyone, this is Dr. Joseph Hammer, and today I wanted to reflect on an experience I had today at the Central Kentucky Showing Up for Racial Justice event that I was at tonight. And the topic was on cultural appropriation, and when is it appropriation, which has a negative connotation, and when is it celebration or endorsement of it. And one of the things that came up in the group is that there was an online discussion that one of the members was a part of on Facebook, and this group came up with a list of filters or critical thinking questions that can be brought to bear when thinking about, is the thing that I'm doing an exercise in cultural appropriation or is it not? And I thought it was really good and made sense, and that I would share it. And the person sharing it did not say which group it was, otherwise I would give credit to them. But I did want to kind of capture it and share it because I think it is really useful, though I'm sure lists like this exist elsewhere on the internets. So it says cultural appropriation is more of an exercise in critical thinking than a set list of things you can and cannot do. So although there are definitely a number of hard no's, such as wearing blackface, there are situations in which whether it's cultural appropriation or not is a lot more difficult to discern. And so some questions that can be useful are, number one, do I understand and appreciate the cultural significance of this thing? So for example, if a white person is thinking about wearing dreadlocks or adapting the cultural dress of a group, or thinking about playing drums in a manner that's suggestive of an indigenous culture, and are we celebrating that culture, or is it more appropriation of that in a way that's disrespectful? So do I understand and appreciate the cultural significance of this? Because if you don't understand the cultural appreciation, then it's more of a tourism or a fun and unserious thing that you're just trying out, and then it would probably be less appropriate. The second question is, am I using it in a respectful way? So there are some manners in which you might adopt a style of dress or a mannerism, and it can be done in more or less respectful ways. And so if we think of examples of sports teams where they take on the mannerisms or dress or dance of American Indian or Native American tribes, and in thinking about how they display these cultural artifacts, is it in a respectful way or not respectful way? And I think a lot of the times it's not very respectful, and quite obviously inappropriate for that reason. Am I profiting off of this somehow? So this question of profit came up particularly around business and celebrities. So a lot of celebrities, like white celebrities, getting into hip-hop or rap, adopting cultural dress or hairstyles or mannerisms that are consistent with black culture, and is doing so helping them profit and increase their personal brand, even though it's not a part of their own culture. So are they profiting off of it? Another question is this something that people who use it would be discriminated against for using it? So the example that came up in the group was around hair, dreads. So by this white person adopting this dreadlock style, is wearing dreadlocks as something that's a good fit for someone who is black and has hair that naturally benefits from that style, rather than just merely a style or preferred way of wearing it, but it's naturally suited to someone's hairstyle. Is that something that a black person might be discriminated against for wearing? And there have been plenty of news stories and articles about black people who have been fired or demoted or otherwise discriminated against because their natural hairstyle was deemed unprofessional for the workplace or inappropriate. Another question is, has someone from this group of people told me it's not okay? This is one of the more trickier questions because folks from a given cultural group are not a monolith. So you can, if you were going to ask me about something about white culture, I might have one opinion feeling about it, and another white person may have a different feeling about it. And so again, if you want to be conservative, you take everybody's opinions into account as you interact with folks. But if someone has told you that it's not okay, that may be an indication that you might not want to use that style of dress or that mannerism or engage in that behavior. And again, it can be tricky sometimes because you can say, oh, well, aren't there some unreasonable people out there, and are they being too sensitive? And it can get really complicated quickly. And one of the themes that came out of the group was that it's oftentimes nuanced and there are no clear lines. Clear lines don't exist, and that shouldn't even be the goal. It's more about being intentional, thinking critically, and being thoughtful with how we do or don't embrace these mannerisms. And then the last question is, would my use of this thing caused harm to marginalized people? So if by engaging in this mannerism or this style of dress or doing this thing, do you imagine this might cause harm that might feel inappropriate to folks? And so as a counseling psychologist, say in our ethics code, we have this maxim of do no harm, and that's at the core of what we think about. So if by engaging in this mannerism or style of dress or whatnot could potentially do harm, then perhaps it should be avoided. Is the prospect of doing harm versus your own enjoyment or getting a kick out of doing this thing, those aren't really on the same playing field. Harm should be the heavier concern that you should weight more than your own kind of subjective enjoyment of it, I would think. So those are some of the prompts that they came up for. When you think about these questions collectively, it makes a lot of sense to me, at least, that they can help you think about whether this is appreciation, an appropriate expression of this cultural piece, or whether it's appropriation in a way that steals, takes away, reduces the value, reduces the meaning and significance of this thing when it's imported into a cultural context. And a big meta piece of this discussion was also around power, in that it's important to think about who's appropriating from who has the power, which group's mannerisms and dress and behavior is considered the norm, the default. It's invisible such that it's considered what is normal. So a certain way of speaking, a certain approach to deadlines and timeliness, manner of dress, all these different types of things are cultural constructions. And a lot of times in the US we forget that a lot of these norms that we just might talk about as normal or the default amongst white people are a lot of times specific to white culture, and we have no problem putting those expectations on other people. And what does it mean when someone in power appropriates a cultural artifact from another culture, where it's a choice, it's something fun, it's an option, when we choose to appropriate something which for folks in that group may have been a meaningful part of their identity, a way of surviving, an essential piece of who they are. And so for us it's dress up or a fun thing or an indulgence versus a way of life and a meaningful aspect to that group. And thinking about that distinction, why am, what is my motivation behind this, and thinking both about intention is important and impact is even more important. We get hung up on this a lot as white folks, in that we're like, oh, well, I didn't mean for it to be taken this way, or I didn't mean to cause harm, or whatever, which is good. It'd be pretty bad if you meant to cause harm. What kind of human being would you have, right? And good intentions are no excuse. in the end, it's very important to think about what impact is this actually having too, and that should carry even more weight. So yeah, those are some of the key pieces that came up that while they're kind of fresh and swirling around and having me thinking about how I go about my life and what sort of cultural artifacts might I have appropriated over time, and has me thinking about these things. And I think these questions were really handy in helping wade into this debate and think about it. So I wanted to share. Hope that's helpful. And I'll see you next time.